Hello and welcome to the Supernatural Fandom Track here at ConTinual. I'm your host, Gail Z, and tonight we are talking about the witches of Supernatural, the good, the bad, and the really wicked. So before we launch into that, let's let our wonderful panelists introduce themselves, starting with Carole.
Hi, I'm Carole Stokes. You can find me here on ConTinual and Facebook under that name, or Twitter under True_Firesign10. I'm a fanfic writer and a fan since season 3.
Okay. Elektra.
Hi, I'm Elektra Hammond. I'm a writer and an editor, and I've been watching Supernatural since the pilot aired all those many, many years ago.
And Anne.
Hi, I'm Ann Wicker, and I was a latecomer to the Supernatural fandom, but I've really gone down the rabbit hole and just got back from my first convention, in fact. So I am also a former journalist and now a writer and editor, and I'm looking forward to talking about witches.
And I'm Gail Z. And Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic fantasy, urban fantasy, and more. As Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male, paranormal, romance, but the modern worlds are all ones that Sam and Dean could walk into and feel right at home. I also run the TFWNC Supernatural Facebook group here on Facebook, and I'm a staff writer for the Winchester Family Business blog. So lots of good stuff in addition to ConTinual. So let's talk about witches. You know, when we start the series, Dean hates witches. He's just got no use for them. That's one of, we meet up with a bunch of witches in those first seasons, and they're obviously not up to anything good. And as the series goes on, a few exceptions are made. Who are some of the most memorable witches for you in Supernatural? And let's start with that. Elektra?
Well, I know we'll get to Rowena in depth, but my favorite one-shot witch is Patrick, the guy who runs the poker game, and all of the convolutions they get through as Dean insists that he can find a way to trick this guy. It must be the poker chips. Let's steal the poker chips. No, it's not the chips. It might be the 900-year-old witch. And he has such a sense of humor. He's entertaining. He's doing his own thing. If you beat him, he's pretty good about it. And he is just such an entertaining character. He doesn't seem to be good or evil. He's just sort of a different side of witches than the other ones we've seen, who all seem to be very much so focused and narrow that they can't see what's going on around them. And this guy, I guess, has been around long enough. He's really got a good idea of what people are going to do. And when he runs into a hunter, I can take these guys, no problem.
How about you, Anne?
Well, I have to agree with Elektra about Patrick. I really liked that episode, and, you know, laughed like crazy when he claps his hands to Sam. But it was also very touching when he let the older man win and so he could see his granddaughter's bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah. And so you're right, he had this sort of not good, not evil sort of persona. And obviously this really nice woman had fallen in love with him, but she couldn't take the lifestyle after a certain point. I really enjoyed the episode with Don and Maggie Stark, played by Charisma Carpenter and James Marsters from Buffy. And I just thought that they were great. They had great chemistry. and the whole plot about him cheating, and that they've gone through, and they obviously had gone through this scenario many times over the course of however old they were. And you know, Sam's idea to get them talking was really great. But they certainly did some damage on the way. But then he kind of redeemed himself and came in at the last minute and saved Sam and Dean from the Leviathan guy. So there was good and bad there as well. But I really enjoyed those two.
I love the stereotype of the cute assistant who would pick up his dry cleaning and baked him cupcakes and everything, but wasn't having an affair with him. She was just that nice.
Yeah.
I mean, it was suspicious as heck, but no, she was just his secretary. She just was so nice.
Yeah.
How about you, Carol?
Well, those are certainly among my favorites too. I mean, Patrick, he's like chaotic neutral, you know, he doesn't weigh it either way. He just waits to see how it plays out, you know, and of course, then the Starks are just hugely entertaining and everything. And I think the big difference with those three characters are they're presented as a fairly well-rounded character in their own way. So many of the witches that we see are very single-threaded. Like they have this one thing they want and they're just going towards it. And I guess that makes sense with being, you know, Monster of the Week type episodes, but it made those three in particular, I think, stand out and be very refreshing. But I did like, I thought the Plum sisters were very amusing, you know, with their little love spells and just the way they were getting everybody to do everything they wanted and then bashing their heads. And I was just rewatching Lily Sunder, which is interesting because I didn't even think of her being a witch at first, but she was using Enochian magic, where she wasn't using the traditional, you know, hex bags and spells and all that stuff. She had learned angel magic and was using it at a terrible, terrible cost to herself. And so she was a very interesting character, I thought, because she didn't care what she was doing to herself. You know, she just wanted to, you know, even the score. So she was still in a way single-threaded, but in the end, because we got to see her for 2 episodes, she was able to embrace a wider view of things and move past her own personal goal. And I think that's partly what helped then make her very interesting in the end compared to some of the more by the book witches.
What all of those characters have in common is they're presented as characters that have been around for a long time and have had a chance to see the world through, you know, multiple lifetimes, as opposed to the human witches that we see in a lot of the episodes are somebody that bought a spell and they're using a spell or a couple of spells and they're very new to it and they don't have the life experience to look at things the way that those other characters are written. And maybe that's why we were drawn to characters like the Starks, who are presented as talking about events in history because they lived them.
As opposed to Amanda and Renee, who are like doing spells to get good refi rates and you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of those are among my top favorites. Some of the ones that stand out in my mind were the 3 sisters that were trying to get into Rowena's apartment after she died, and the family dynamics there, and the bullied younger sister, that the one boiled her bunny. I mean, it was like straight out of Fatal Attraction. But it was interesting watching, you know, imagining dysfunctional family dynamics with magic. Nothing good can come of that. And then, you know, not everybody learns over time, because the witches that cast the forget spell on Dean and regarding Dean had been around for a long time. They'd been around, you know, as long or maybe longer than Rowena, since they had history together. And they obviously hadn't become better people or really broadened their horizons. They were still pretty nasty, petty, vindictive people, which
My research says that they're descended from the Druids. So they go back at least as long as she does.
way back, yeah. So that's proof that not everybody learns from having a very long extended life, but that all kind of makes sense with human nature. But I thought they were fascinating because in a way, they were trying to do what Sam and Dean do all the time, which is bring their brother back. But because they were doing it in a way that would have harmed Sam or Dean, we didn't like them doing that. If it had been Sam and Dean bringing one of each other back by doing exactly the same thing, we probably would have gone, yeah, but you can see how much they're hurt. I mean, he needs his brother. We can ignore all this, body parts and of course he needs his brother. So I did think that was kind of wink, wink, nod, nod, that stuff we give the Winchesters a pass on. These witches are really bad for doing that.
Well, we say the same thing about the Stein family, by the way.
Yeah, this is true.
We don't like what they do because they're not Sam and Dean.
And I wonder if they count also as witches in a way, because what they were doing was beyond regular medicine. There had to be some magic working on that for it to work, I would think.
Well, they had the book, but it was explained away as the original doctor's notes. So maybe they were witches, and maybe he was a witch, the original Frankenstein.
Maybe he called that lightning. Yeah.
Yeah, he used lightning, but yeah. He was also actually a medical doctor. I'm trying, it's been years since I've read the book.
Oh, the original one was.
Yeah.
And he was reanimating people the way that you get toads to jump by applying electricity. But maybe there was magic involved in the supernatural version, because they were certainly screwing around in ways that we don't think is possible in our world, especially
without like a level 3 trauma center. And they just had a gurney in the basement.
Yeah.
So that kind of
and no anesthesia.
Yeah.
And they were like adding second hearts
and multiple nipples for the ladies or the guys. I don't judge.
Makes you wonder what else the guys had extras of.
That's right.
Okay, I'm not going there. Just not.
So what other witches? One of the ones that comes to mind are, and this is another Monster of the Week one, where it's a neighborhood coven and everybody thinks they're having a book club and they're actually hexing their neighbors. And it's venal and petty, and you can kind of think you'd know some people.
Except they were selling their souls to the devil and didn't realize. Right. Well, to a devil.
Yeah.
And that's why they were like demon. That was one of the ones where Dean was running around saying, "Oh God, witches and bodily fluids, I hate them."
Skeevy. They were skeevy.
Yeah.
But also the same thing with the witches in It's the Great Pumpkin, Sam Winchester, where he was like, "Oh, skeevy stuff," as they're trying.
They have to use all sorts of nasty stuff.
Well, speaking of nasty stuff, it was also the episode, I've got the number, it's season 10, episode 12 with Katja. I guess I'm saying that right, where, she makes Dean and she makes the kids, Dean into a kid. And it's the Hansel and Gretel story, basically. And which I love that episode because the kid that played Dean was fabulous. Really and the whole idea of her coming over and saying, well, they were picking people who nobody would miss, but that she was also making them into children because they taste better. That was pretty gross. But anyway, that was an interesting episode, and interesting that you know, they went ahead and burned classic witch disposal. They burned her. So
I thought that episode is one of the ones where I feel they did a really good job of tying into real fairy tale / witchy stories, you know, because we had that. It was Hansel and Gretel, and she was the witch, and we had Baba Yaga, and I'm sure I think we had somebody else in there. Oh, well, of course we had the Wicked Witch of the West.
Yeah.
oh yeah.
You know, from us.
But
So
about
it
a
was,
boy, don't forget, Katja was apparently a member of the Grand Coven.
Oh,
So
that's
they
right.
tied it in that way too. And she was supposed to be there to deal with Rowena, and she took a slight tangent.
a sabbatical.
Yeah.
So, but I just liked how they tied in some of the old witch stories that like we grew
Yeah.
up with, and you know, gave them flesh, you know, and everything.
And
And
made
the-
more than just a witch. The evil witch with no name. They gave some of them names and made them gave them motivations. Although the witch from Oz, they didn't do a whole lot with. Although she was crazy powerful because she had no tongue and she couldn't talk.
Oh,
And
she was-
she
she was
had the whole
creepy.
thing where I just watched that one today
yeah, she was
again,
creepy as
and
heck.
where she could get in their heads and stuff too.
Oh,
You know, the classic Wicked Witch of the West wasn't able to do that. So
that's a fantastic episode. Also, that computer thing is going to take a while to happen. So let's go off and watch Game of Thrones. Because everybody loves Game of Thrones.
Well, I'm sure it's kind of light viewing for the Winchesters.
Well, they bought it for Charlie. They
Yeah.
bought her a season of it, and off they went, and they sat and watched it because, you know, they don't get HBO in the bunker apparently.
Too much
The
shielding.
episode that gave us a bunch of red herrings that looked like they could be witches, classic witches, and was Fairy Tales, where the girl is in the coma and she's manifesting the classic fairy tales that her father read to her when she was little. And I think that's more of a psychic kind of thing. She's not intentionally doing that or working witchcraft to do that, but because so many of the classic fairy tales involve witches, at the beginning, the boys don't know what they're dealing with because, well, in the stories, this was a witch, but we can't find the witch. So that was an interesting twist. When is witch not a witch?
Witch is red herring, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
And there've also been good witches for various things like, other good witches like James the Cop, who they had history with. And once he found out about the supernatural, he decided to study up, and he stayed a cop, but he was also a witch, and he got involved in the supernatural world where he was a cop. Only they weren't happy with him because he got involved with his familiar. Episode. Where is he?
It's
Man's best
right,
friend
I've got
with
it.
benefits.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
There's some really
He,
questionable relationships there.
Yeah, it was kind of questionable, but I thought it was interesting that they did explore the fact that, you know, the history of witches having familiars, you know, black cats, whatever. And so I thought that aspect was interesting, but yeah, the whole aspect of their relationship was a little much.
Although it's Sam explaining to Dean that she just showed up here and can we let her stay the night, you know?
She just wants her belly rubbed. Belly rubbed.
Oh, they did that. The camera work on that was fabulous.
Yeah. And then Dean's face when, yeah.
Okay, and I think that's the first episode where they have the witch killing bullets, where they build the witch killing spell and put it into bullets. Because when they had less powerful witches that were humans working a spell, they were able to kill them. But as the witches got more powerful, as the seasons wore on, they needed to start using more powerful stuff. And effectively, they started doing spells.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Sam is 100% Rowena's heir. So if we're going to talk about favorite witches in Supernatural, I think we've got the Sam Witch.
Yes, we have the
Oh,
Sam
yeah.
Witch for sure. Because there are boy witches for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know, Max Baines, the
Yeah.
Baines twins.
Mhm.
And I thought it was great that that their mother was a witch and a hunter, and she passed that on to the children. Although it was never clear to me if the sister Alicia,
I
was,
think it was just Max.
yeah, I thought it was just Max
I
as the
think she
witch.
might have
witch.
been a little, she might have been a little psychic maybe. But he
I
was
don't
the one
remember.
who actually did any kind of spell work.
Right. She
Yeah.
was just
Yeah.
a hunter.
Yeah.
Well,
Mhm.
right. Just a hunter. Because that's not enough.
But that was also a really interesting take on magic with the whole twigs and twine and building the figure out of the willow, and that really goes way back if you want to draw on like druidic influences and really ancient stuff. And I love the way the writers did their homework on this stuff and really drew from folklore and traditions, and it made it so much more believable and real, especially if you knew anything about people who actually practice the craft and go, yeah, they're getting their sources right on that. Who else? I mean, there have been a lot of witches.
Gary
I was-
Frankel.
I'm sorry.
Swap meet.
Yeah.
Swap meet.
Oh,
Do not
yeah.
forget the little kid with the grimoire in the basement who decided that he wanted to kill Sam and Dean and become, get all the rewards from the demons because
Was he really a
no one
witch though? I
turned
mean,
him
he
off.
did a spell. He did a spell to summon a demon, but I don't know if he was really a witch beyond that. I mean, he wasn't like throwing
He had a
spells around.
grimoire and he was summoning demons. What does that make you?
Well, that's kind of what I'm saying. Is that enough to make you a witch, or are you simply performing a spell? I mean, anybody.
Was that the
There's a
only
lot of
spell he
people-
did?
There's a lot. Can I finish?
Yeah.
There's a lot of people, a lot of hunters doing spells and everything, but they're not really. They're even doing more. I mean, this literally, he did a spell to summon a demon, and that was it. So he was dabbling, but I don't know if that makes him a witch,
That
like-
was the only spell we saw. Was that real? They got a book that looked like it was magic. Did they not try any of the other spells before they decided that they could summon a demon?
It didn't seem like it, because they were like, hey, we're going to get a demon and get rich.
Well, no, question there.
Bada bing, bada boom.
Yeah, a question
I
there
don't
is
know.
the normal way to summon a demon, if you're not a witch, is to go to a crossroads. So if, and they never really defined this in Supernatural on could anybody with a spell book and enough practice work a spell? Or did you need some kind of innate ability?
They did.
Did they? Okay.
In Girls, Rowena sits down with the two hookers and starts to talk to them about how you can become a witch. And she talks to them about how you can, if you have innate ability like she does, you can do spells, but if you don't, you can learn if there's somebody to teach you.
Mhm. It's the same kind of thing with Nora in Repo Man. Nora is not intrinsically a witch, but she studies and she learns how to do spells and summonings and banishments and everything. So she becomes, like I said, there's no intrinsic magic. She's a regular person, but she's able to perform the mechanics of stuff enough to to do witchly activities.
There's
Yeah.
there's an implication that natural witches are stronger than people that like Nora who pick it up
Mhm.
and study. And that the other way you can get power is you can make a demon deal.
Right. And that
And-
totally makes sense, because I mean, think about somebody who's becoming an athlete. You have your people who are intrinsically athletic, and if they do X amount of training, they're going to be super fast at, track or whatever. And then you have people who don't have that intrinsic, but can still train to get up to that, but it's going to take a lot more work, and they may not achieve the same, and so I feel like that's the same thing with the witches. If you have the ability, you're already up here, and then you can work at it, but are you always ever going to be quite as strong as the ones who already have it, like in their veins or their bloodline, or,
You got to field a whole baseball team, and your school is not going to have 20 people who are gifted at playing baseball, but you might have a couple, and everybody else is just going to have to go out there and work harder and practice more. And there's going to be one guy that doesn't have to do very much, and he's going to be the best guy on the team. It always works out that way.
Yeah.
And we haven't heard from you in a little bit. Anybody else to throw into the ring?
I was just looking at my list here. I'd like to go back for a minute to the Wicked Witch of the West, and then the follow-up episode that actually had the Wizard of Oz in it. And I thought that was interesting, and that Charlie had the spell cast on her to divide her into good and bad Charlie. And so that was really interesting to see a different aspect of that legend, played out in the good versus the classic good versus evil kind of thing. And so I really enjoyed the follow-up almost as much as I did the first one with Dorothy and the Wicked Witch of the West and that sort of thing. And that Oz magic was different, and they couldn't kill him they couldn't kill the Wicked Witch unless they had something with Oz magic, like the poppies or the shoes. I thought that was a great twist, rather than melting her, and then when they had to kill the wizard, the guy had to kill himself in order to kill the bad part. So that was an interesting aspect of that, I thought. And there was one that somebody mentioned, and now I've lost it, that I thought was really, I was interested in this, and I always say this wrong, and I know that there's different ways to say it, but the one where they were, I guess it was, I don't know which episode it was, but the one where they get the Samhain, and I always thought that was a Celtic festival. But I did some looking up, and it's believed by some that he was the Celtic god of the dead. And that's who in the episode they were trying to bring forth into the world. But most people think that's an error, that he was invented by the conservative, that the Celtic god of the dead was invented by 18th century conservative Christians for whatever reason, and it was perpetuated by the conservative Christians who opposed the Druids and the Wiccans. And so, but I had always known about it as a festival, around Halloween. So I thought that was interesting that the writers did enough research to dig deeper into that legend and find out about the Celtic god of the dead.
A pity they didn't pronounce his name correctly.
Yeah.
Because it's Samhain, not Samhain.
Yeah. I knew it wasn't Sam Hain too.
Now, two of the most influential witches on the whole show come down to Ruby and Rowena. What do we have to say? Because we find out that Ruby, when she was human, was a witch.
They never really do anything with that, though. They tell us that, but because everything is all demony with her, I think really the only thing I can remember being witchy with her is she did use hex bags, and she taught them how to use hex bags to help conceal themselves from the angels. But it seemed like, having become a demon, she had kind of moved past all of the witchy stuff.
Well,
So,
she's been a demon for quite a while.
yeah, you know, and I think at that point, demon supersedes witch. So
I think I'm
she
going to
kind
go
of
with
had greater
Carole on that.
powers already now, so you know. wasn't
Can
really-
I bring up one more witch before we
Yeah,
forget it?
sure.
Henry
Sure.
Winchester walked down the hall and very casually threw together the ingredients to do a time travel spell. I'm going to suggest that perhaps he'd done other spells before.
The whole Men of
Maybe
Letters
he was
thing-
pretty adept. It seems the Men of Letters had more skills than we gave them credit for.
And that kind of comes around to Sam becoming a practical witch, if not a legacy witch, which could have been true of the Men of
I
Letters.
wonder if there was some natural ability there, and that was why Rowena wanted him to be her successor. Because he turned out to be quite a powerful witch.
Yeah. Now, we have seen Dean and Bobby work some spells as well, but Sam seemed to have the real talent and inclination for it.
As long as they remember to chill their chicken legs.
Yeah. So, Rowena.
Everybody's favorite. Sorry,
Yeah.
my favorite, absolutely.
I love her.
Love Rowena. Just love her. I named my car Rowena because it's red.
Is it red?
And start us off.
Well, when we first meet her, we, don't quite know what to think about her. And she's definitely opposing the boys. And then there's the twist that she's Crowley's mother. I remember the very first time I watched all that, I went, what? I was so shocked. But she just, but she had this spirit and just like, how old was she? She wasn't 900. She was what, 500, 300, I forget. Anyway, she just had this air about her, the take charge air, the manipulative side of her as she tries to get Crowley to do what she wants him to do. It was just brilliant. I mean, the writers took what she could do and what Ruth could do with that role and just let her go. And I just really, I had to admire those early episodes so much because, you liked her so much in spite of herself, in spite of what she was doing to the boys and to Crowley even. And then later, as she comes through to help, especially in regarding Dean and other and the other real thing, I mean, in the regarding Dean, she did so well in that one, helping Sam help Dean. But the other thing was when she and Sam are in the car and they're talking about their experiences with Lucifer, and she lets down her guard with Sam and admits to being terrified. Maybe not in so many words, but she is. And I think that was really the beginning of she and Sam bonding.
Yeah, I would agree.
I really like the whole, she wanted so much to be a part of the Grand Coven. And then she finally became powerful enough to tell them all to go to hell. And then she tried to form her own coven. I'll just form the mega coven and the heck with the grand coven. But she really wanted to belong to a group and have friends, girlfriends. I mean, Sam and Dean were okay, but she really wanted to have friends. She didn't want to be lonely. And Ruth managed to be so powerful and so entertaining, and yet bring through this whole, but Rowena is lonely and wants to belong. And she did it beautifully.
Well, and she not only could then tell them to go to hell, but she ended up as the queen of hell.
Well, there is that.
I still want to know if that one witch is a hamster still.
I'll bet. Well, hamsters do not have a long lifespan.
But
So-
magical hamsters.
When she can't renew whatever she was doing to keep herself going.
That's true. Fair enough.
Also,
Carole-
they tied her in with Ketch, which was beautifully done.
And don't forget her little dalliance with Gabriel.
Oh, geez. That was hilarious.
She's had more than a couple of those that they made very surprising.
Yeah.
And I think it's pretty clear she had a couple of boy toys along the way too.
Mm.
I just love
we
Rowena.
need to do a whole panel on Gabriel.
I just love Rowena. I love she always knows who she is. She's always, unafraid to be herself. And I loved how they even styled her, that she always had those long gowns of, velvet or lace or sequins or whatever. She was always very glamorous in her hair and everything. I loved in regarding Dean when Dean's like, your hair is so bouncy. But her whole shifting of, she was completely in everything just for herself, to that slow integration into becoming an ally of the Winchesters. It was just handled so well, because it was a slow process, so we could believe it. It wasn't like, she was and then she wasn't, or she wasn't and then she was. It was like every interaction they had was a step down that path. So by the time we get to the rupture, Sam and Dean are devastated to lose her. They're just crushed. It's as bad as anybody they've lost along the way. Whereas, when you think back to the early days, they would have been like, oh, thank goodness she was a pain in the butt.
Well,
So they just,
the people writing the Rowena episodes apparently had seen the show.
yes. So it was a really nice development of her character. We were constantly finding out new things about her, seeing new emotions in her. Even though she presented this very brassy, brazen front, yes, she had her tender, chewy insides, and what we got to see all of that, and and she's a crackerjack witch.
I thought one of the other things that was very interesting from her character development is, in the beginning, she relied much more on that manipulation, which is classically what somebody who doesn't have any real world power has to rely on. Because if you don't have actual political power to make people do what you want, then you have to get them to want what you want. But as time went on, while she was always clever, she came into enough power of her own that she didn't have to be the Medici mother, the pardon me, the kind of medieval mother behind the throne, trying to flatter and manipulate. She could just come straight out and say what she wanted. And I thought that was an interesting progression of her kind of coming into the modern world and mindset.
Well, I think some of that is because of her dealing with Sam and Dean. They were like, they're WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. It wasn't like having to deal with demons and Crowley and who knows whatever untold countless, probably male witches and stuff that, either I know, I can totally see she's petite and everything, and I'm sure they just downplayed her like, oh, and then having to fight against the Grand Coven. And so she found herself in a place where she was respected and listened to. And I think that gave her that freedom to grow into that then, because she didn't have to resort to that coercion and, kind of string pulling that she had spent so much time doing.
They really needed her skill set bad.
Yeah. Oh, she was a huge asset. Huge.
Yeah.
Huge.
Well, and at some point along the way, they discovered that Sam was the one who was going to kill her.
Mm-hmm.
And they all bonded, and it was, but I'm not going to kill you. And then they moved on from there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at one point, she was going to kill Sam because he was supposed to be the one to kill her.
Right. And really, he didn't. His hand was on the knife, but I watched that scene today, and she puts her hand on his hand. He cannot bring himself to plunge it into her, and she puts her hand on his hand and does it. So his hand's driving the knife, but she's the impetus behind that.
Yeah, but she makes out okay after that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I mean, in that
surprised.
particular key moment, he just, after everything they had done, he couldn't bring himself to do it.
Yeah. The surprise on their faces when they go down to hell and she's in charge and has turned it into a cocktail party is just so beautiful.
And they restyled her. So she, gone are the elegant long gowns and the tumbling ringlets, and she has like this very modern updo and a little pantsuit going on and stuff. So
well,
this was a new and improved Rowena.
Yeah, she's a businesswoman now. She's running Hell Inc.
Well, she doesn't have to charm anybody into doing what she wants anymore. She can just insist on it.
Yeah, I thought that in another episode where they go to, I guess it's Dean and somebody goes to hell to find something, and they run into a guy and they say, well, we want to see Rowena, and he said, well, she's busy at a welcoming tea party or whatever, and then the guy rolls his eyes and says, apparently we do that now.
For new arrivals, yes.
That's classic. Absolutely classic Rowena.
Well, folks, believe it or not, we have once again blasted through this hour. Before we wrap up, let's go around and have everybody tell folks where they can find you online, starting with Anne.
You can find me on Facebook under my name, Ann Wicker, or on Twitter or Instagram, also under Ann Wicker, if you just search my name. And I'm also on ConTinual, a lot of panels, and in the Facebook group for Supernatural. And I can never remember, I'm like, I can't ever remember all the initials, but I'm there. So look me up.
Elektra.
Everything you want to know about me is up at untilmidnight.com.
Nice and easy. Carole.
I'm here on Facebook in the TFWNC group and on ConTinual under the name Carole Stokes. I'm on Twitter as true_firesign10. I'm also on WordPress, and my fic is on AO3 under firesign10.
And I'm pretty easy to find at gailzmartin.com, morganbryce.com, the Supernatural TFWNC group here on Facebook, but mostly in ConTinual. So thank you all for being wonderful panelists and for an amazing discussion. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There'll be more Supernatural coming up soon on ConTinual. So we'll see you online.